but sometimes depending on their geography, their cultural upbringing, just the shape that their intellect has had over the years, they end up with a different belief system. And so for Christians to say, well, that's not legitimate, that subjective experience you had, but mine is, and I do hear from God, but you don't. I don't understand that whole paradigm, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think you spell that out really, really well. And there's lots of different directions we could go with that. But where would you begin then, Eric? I'll pass the baton to you.
I was hoping you were going to answer her questions, Justin.
No, I'm just here to host this one. I'm not here to try and answer this one.
You know what?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I've discovered about, and what Grace has helped me discover as a pastor, and I think my wife, who's also a pastor alongside me, would say the same, is our job is to love the people God puts in front of us, and to love them as best as possible. And that's true of all Christians, but I think for pastors, there's a special kind of responsibility to love our people well. And it occurred to me in recent years, I would say, that the way to love someone who brings this, frankly, like onslaught of questions with her, many different questions, like all at once. When I had to understand at a certain point, when Grace does that, she's not asking me to answer all of her questions. She's asking me if it's okay to ask them. And that was a really sweet revelation to me. You never told me that's what you were asking for, but I don't know how I came to that conclusion. I just know that now, that you're not, I mean, you would love it if I answered some of your questions well, and that's fine. But what you really want is to be loved well by Christians, and for us to be who we say we are. And I think that starts with just valuing your inquiries and not dismissing them.
Or even just saying, that's a really good question. I've thought that myself,
Yeah. Which that's partially some of the conversations we've had, which I've asked some of, and continue to ask some of the same questions Grace is asking. And I think it's been important for me to understand it's not up to me to come up with answers that are above my pay grade. Like, why do some Christians say that only certain Christians will go to heaven and everybody else goes to hell? I don't know why they say that. But more importantly, I don't know who's going to go to heaven and who's going to go to hell. And not to be too reductive, but the only thing I know is Jesus. Like, truly, on a personal level, the only thing I know for sure is I was led to believe that it's more plausible than not that Jesus actually rose from the tomb, from the grave, and that he was killed by the Romans on a cross, and that he did walk the earth. And so I started with the resurrection, and then I start to extrapolate everything else out from there. And I find no better explanation for the facts that I came across than the ones that are given to me by the gospel. And I find nothing better in the world to do with my time than spread this gospel that Jesus came to give us. It's better than anything else I've ever encountered. And so when it comes to like being the answer man or giving you all of the right responses, I don't see that as my role, but I do want to try and redirect someone in Grace's place to Jesus. I want to redirect them to Scripture, because if you're listening closely to the cries of Grace's heart, a lot of times it's about what Christians have done. Christians are people, and it's about what Christians are saying, and the Christians in your life in particular, what they've told you. And you're coming with all this trauma and pain from things you've been told by Christians, things which, if you take those to Scripture, Scripture will do the work for you. Like, the Bible will take care of those things that Christians have said. Like, I just think the Scriptures have to become the filter for us, and not just our own experiences with judgmental or hypocritical Christians. So that's just kind of my starting point as a pastor. When someone like Grace, or like Grace herself, comes and brings these questions, I just want to love her well, make sure she knows that this is, I guess, to use a common phrase these days, a safe space to ask these kinds of questions, and that nobody's going to run her off or make her feel like less than because she's asking.